Thank you. Nice to be here today to share this time together with you all. My topic is evangelism with the ear, the ministry of listening. Most of us are familiar with the expression or the phrase minister of speaking, but maybe the phrase or the expression the ministry of listening may sound a little new to you. But as we have heard this yesterday, today, I suppose throughout the conference, that there is such an important part in being able to establish relationships before we can really begin to evangelize. And of course, to be able to establish a relationship, listening becomes crucial. The way we listen determines how deep we'll go in our relationship with somebody else. There are different types, different levels of relationships, beginning from the very casual to the deep. You know, casual conversation is something like, "Good morning, how are you?" I go to work every morning and there's a security guard that greets me. I say, "Good morning," and he always says, "Hi, how are you?" But I don't think he really wants to know how I'm feeling. It's an expression that we use. We don't even have to think. We don't have to even listen to do that kind of greeting. So that's the most casual kind of relationship we may have with another person, but that's important. We acknowledge the presence of another person. So that's important. So it serves its purpose, but that's about as far as it goes. And then we have situations in which we need to ask for information. When I got to the airport, I was supposed to rent a car, and I didn't know where to go. I walked around, couldn't find any signs that says rental car, so I asked someone, how do I go to the areas where I could rent a car? And he said, you got to go downstairs, walk outside, wait for the shuttle bus, get on it, and it'll take you there. So I had to listen to get that information. So it's a little deeper type of relationship. And then we have the chit-chat type. You know, we get together, talk about the weather, talk about sports. For that, minimum amount of listening is required. But that's about the extent of it. Then there's a deeper kind of relationship where it requires a lot more intensive listening. Let's create a fictitious situation here. Let's say that Mr. Sato is a businessman working in this area. He's in his early 40s, and he comes to church. The way it started was that they have two little kids, and they were placed in the preschool at the church. So mother got involved, and eventually the husband started to come once in a while. So you see this person, it's called Mr. Sato. Okay, so Mr. Sato comes to church, and just you know him, and he says, "Hi, how are you, Mr. Sato?" "I'm fine." But one day you kind of stop him and say, "Mr. Sato, how are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm not doing so well. Things aren't going very well." "Oh, what's going on?" "You know, the business has been really slow. The economy is bad. And my boss is telling me that we may not have a job a year from now. You know, and that kind of worries me." "Oh, well, you know what the Bible says? Don't worry. You know, God will take care of you. So hang in there, okay? Don't worry." Do you think Mr. Sato will come back to ask you any personal questions? Probably not. Let's recreate the same situation. "Mr. Sato, how are you doing?" "Oh, I don't know." "Was anything wrong?" "Oh, well, you know, work isn't going very well, and business is slow, and my boss is worried that we may not have a job a year from now." "Oh, really? Well, that sounds serious." "Yeah, well, I don't know what to do." "Well, how does that affect you? How are you feeling about, what kind of impact is that having on you?" "Well, you know, I stay up late at night. I can't sleep very well. I think about all these things and worry a lot, and I'm kind of feeling depressed. And then my wife is also upset, and she's not very happy. Wow, that's tough. That's heavy, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know what to do. Well, I'm going to pray for you. Is that okay? I'll pray for you, all right? But not just pray, but I just like to see how you're doing. So can we maybe get together once in a while so I can find out how you're doing in your situation? So would that be okay? Yeah, I would like that. I'd like to talk to someone once in a while. Well, how do you think? What do you think? It's a little better, right? You have an open-ended relationship. You can continue. And as you continue to talk and listen to him, he will probably share deeper things about his life. And then you will eventually have an opportunity to share your own testimony. I've been in a situation like that before, and I really didn't know what to do. But being a Christian really helped me. I would always be able to, call out to God and ask him to help. That really helped me. Things like that, you can share, would begin to plant a seed in his mind that there is such a thing as, living in the power of the Holy Spirit. So that way you would have a deep, satisfying, deep, meaningful relationship going, and you will have opportunities to share Christ eventually. So that's an example of how listening can be utilized to deepen the relationship, to open the way, pave the way for deeper interaction. Now, there are many different ways of listening, but one that I found most helpful is shown on the screen. It's the acronym OARS, OARS. It was developed by a group of psychologists or counselors called motivational interviewing practitioners. It was started out by a psychologist by the name of William Miller, who was a professor of psychology at the University of New Mexico, I believe, and he was a Christian. And he developed this approach and technique. It's been widely used, and it's been found to be very effective. I work 2 jobs, actually. I work with the Asian American Christian Counseling Service in the evening. I do a lot of marriage counseling and stuff. But during the day, I work with the homeless, mentally ill of Los Angeles. And some of those mentally ill, homeless people can be very, very difficult to work with. They're very hard-hearted and closed up. And being the oldest staff member at work, I get the toughest cases. They all, bring the ones that they can't deal with to me. So I've had some very difficult cases, and it's not easy. And there's this joke that I heard years ago. A psychiatrist asked, "Well, how do you deal with all the people that come to you with all the problems all the time? Don't you get tired of listening?" And he says, "Who listens?" So, there is such a thing as compassion fatigue. If you keep on listening to those people day in and day out, you can really get exhausted and burned out. But since I learned this particular technique, I have not found myself burning out anymore. It is a very effective way to really interact with another person. It's the acronym OARS. It's like when you row the boat, you use the oar. Okay, it's like you go down the stream, gently down the stream, rowing the boat with the oars, and that's how it works. You don't really resist, you don't really fight with the person, you don't try to teach the person, you encourage the person, so somehow enable the person to open up his own heart or her own heart. Start with the O, which stands for open-ended questions. You ask a question that cannot be answered with yes or no, so that opens up the door. And then when you hear the answer, whatever the answer may be, you affirm it. That's the second letter, A. Whatever you hear, you affirm. O, open-ended questions. A stands for affirm. And then the third one, R, is to reflect. If you can remember to say something else kind of rephrase what you hear. And the person will say, yeah, that's what I mean. So that's helpful. If you have the chance to summarize it, the last letter stands for summary. Summarize what you think you heard. So if you make a summary of what you think you heard, the person can say, yeah, that's what I said, or maybe he can correct you. Say, no, that's not whatever the answer is. But anyway, if you keep on using the or approach, you can really go all the way. It's very interesting how things develop. And it's not a very difficult way to maneuver. And I've had some very tough people to work with, and then I've seen some very interesting things happen. And sometimes you hear things that you don't know what to think of. And sometimes I forget the OARS, but if you can remember the first two, opening the questions, affirm, O and A, if you can remember those two, you can usually manage almost any kind of situation. So keep on asking questions and affirm whatever you hear. And if you have a chance to summarize or reflect, that's fine too. But sometimes you hear something that you don't know what to do with. You're totally in a shock. Okay, what do? You can't even remember OARS anymore. It's happened to me, and I'm sure it can happen. When Mr. Fujiyabu was talking about the suicide people, he said he didn't know what to say. So it happens, But so if you don't know what to say, remember Proverbs 17:28. Does anybody know what that verse means? Proverbs 17:28. It says, even the fool is considered wise when he keeps silent. So if you don't know what to say, just say nothing. Just say nothing. Just listen. Keep on listening. Even the fool is considered wise if he keeps silence. When I was in Japan last year, I did all these seminars in Japan. I was at the crash headquarters teaching the staff and the volunteers how to listen. And there was a woman there who was married to a missionary by the name of Ray Holmes. I don't know, some of you may know him. But anyway, he's a counselor, like I am. And he's been a missionary. He and his wife have been a missionary in Japan for about 10, 20 years. Anyway, there's a story. The wife told me that when they first got there, Ray did not know any Japanese. He just got there. But a pastor asked him, there's a woman in my church who is really distraught. Will you talk with her or work with her? He says, okay. So he met her and she started talking. He did not understand the word she was saying because he had never, he did not know the language. But then after about 20 minutes, she was finished. And the next day the pastor said, Ray, I don't know what you did, but she's fine now. And I've had similar experiences, and I'm sure some of you probably have some similar experiences. All you have to do is to be a listening, sounding board. Just listen. You don't have to say a thing. Even a fool is considered wise if he keeps silent. So if you don't know what else to do, just do that. And that will be just as effective. Counseling, 80% of counseling is really listening. So in a way, I make my living by listening. That's all I have to do is listen and listen and listen. Once in a while, you have a chance to say something, but if you can really listen deeply, that always helps. So, okay, we go until 2:15, right? Okay, so we have about a little over half hour for practice sessions. What I'd like for you to do is to pair up with another person, not husband and wife, same gender, and someone that you do not know, hopefully. So you pair up with someone, and we can have half-hour practice session using the OR approach. Okay, you can talk about one of three things. You can talk about how you happen to be here today. What made you decide to come to this conference? That's one topic you could talk about. Ask questions and listen and share. Another a thing you could talk about would be, what are some of your passions? What are you really excited about? What do you really enjoy doing? What are some of your passions? That's another topic you could talk about. Or thirdly, you could talk about what has been the most painful experience in your life. You can share your feelings and thoughts about those things. So you could choose either 1, 2, or 3 of those topics, or any 1 or 2 or all 3 of them if you have time. But take turns. One person does the talking, the other person does the listening. When you're done, switch sides and do the same thing. And go as far as you can within the next half hour or a little bit more than that. If you happen to hear something that could be potentially embarrassing, especially when you talk about things that have been painful, please be sure that you don't gossip, you don't tell anybody else. That's the promise you have to make to each other, that you will not repeat what you hear. And if it happens to be something nice, that's okay. But if it happens to be something that could be potentially damaging or embarrassing, you have to keep your mouth shut and not say anything about what you hear to anybody else. When I was in Japan, there was a woman that told me, I would never share anything with any member of my church. If I have something to talk about, I'll look for someone else from another church so I can talk to. Sometimes the church can be the worst place for gossip. So, that's one of the reasons why some Christians hesitate to practice this kind of approach. But we have to make the pledge to each other that we will not repeat what we hear if it happens to be something of negative nature. Okay, any questions? Scripture, the one I quoted is Proverbs 17:28. Yesterday I was in a seminar by Sylvia Ramsquist. She was talking about the same thing. Basically, she was quoting from James, where James says, "Be quick to listen and slow to speak." There's a time to speak. There's a time to be silent. So, this is nothing new, but I think we haven't really had a concrete way to do this. So I'm hoping that you will learn some very basic, simple and basic but effective listening skills, so you can take it with you and use it wherever you happen to be, home, or work, at church, with friends, acquaintance, whatever. And that can be a very effective evangelistic tool, or even discipleship tool for that matter. Okay, any questions? Are we ready to get going? And when the time comes, I'll say it's time to quit, and just keep going, even And if you're not finished, you can continue on later on, in the hallway or something. So are we ready? Need to pair up with another person?